The Xylos Directorate did not engage in the uncivilized messiness of physical warfare. As a hyper-bureaucratic, technologically ascended collective, they preferred to solve territorial disputes through the elegant application of absolute dread. When a stubborn human colony unexpectedly established itself on planet 712, completely ignoring 27 separate passively worded legal notices regarding orbital zoning boundaries, the Directorate decided it was time to deploy their ultimate deterrent. Deep within the sterile, titanium-reinforced chambers of the Xylos High Command, the containment seals of a monolithic black pod began to hiss, venting freezing vapor into the room. Inside lay the Rend-class Hunt Alpha, a biological masterpiece engineered from the galaxy's most horrifying predatory strains. It was not merely a beast of claws and teeth. It was an apex tracker designed to consume the very context of its prey. Once the Hunt Alpha locked onto a target's biological signature, it could trace their atomic wake across shifting terrains, solid matter, and even localized dimensional folds until the target ceased to exist. Its sleek, overlapping plates of obsidian armor clacked together like a swarm of dying beetles, and its multi-jointed limbs shifted with an unnatural, fluid grace. The creature emitted a constant, low-frequency vibration that human ears could barely register, but human brains would instantly process as pure, paralyzing survival panic. With a final bureaucratic keystroke, the Xylos High Command authorized the launch sequence. The heavy pod was fired from the orbital dreadnought, screaming through the thin atmosphere of planet 712 like a falling star, destined to obliterate the humans' illusions of safety. The pod slammed into the red dirt just 300 meters outside the primary human outpost, sending a massive plume of dust and shattered rock into the sky. Inside the orbiting Xylos observation deck, a dozen high-ranking analysts gathered around the primary telemetry feed, adjusting their visual optics to watch the inevitable slaughter. As the dust began to settle, the POD's reinforced hull split open along 3 symmetrical seams, revealing the smoking, dark interior. The Hunt Alpha stepped out onto the alien soil, its sensory tendrils uncoiling from its head like a nest of hunting vipers, tasting the air for the unique chemical markers of terrestrial life. It didn't take long to find a target. Walking calmly back from a nearby machinery supply shed was a single human male named Dave, dressed in a mundane flannel shirt and carrying a heavy wrench. The Hunt Alpha immediately dropped into a low, predatory crouch, its obsidian armor plates locking together into a rigid, aerodynamic shell as it began to glide across the dirt with terrifying speed. It closed the distance in seconds, halting just 10 paces from the human to flare its sensory arrays in a classic apex dominance display. The creature emitted its engineered terror frequency, a wave of biological authority that had caused entire armies of lesser species to collapse into catatonic fits of screaming hysteria. The Xylos analysts leaned closer to their screens, waiting for the human's knees to buckle, waiting for the blood-curdling screams that always preceded the hunt. But the human's knees did not buckle. Dave stopped walking, blinked twice, and slowly lowered his heavy wrench to his side. On the Xylos observation deck, the biological monitoring arrays began to flash yellow, indicating a massive data anomaly. According to the sensors, Dave's heart rate had only spiked by an insignificant 4 beats per minute, a reaction more consistent with mild surprise than existential terror. The Hunt Alpha, completely unaccustomed to a target standing its ground, froze mid-stride, its multi-jointed limbs locking in a state of profound mechanical confusion. It pulsed its terror frequency again, louder this time, causing the gravel around its feet to vibrate and liquefy, yet the human merely tilted his head, studying the shifting mass of blades and tendrils with genuine, unbothered curiosity. Dave rubbed the back of his neck, smiled warmly, and let out a relaxed chuckle that baffled the watching alien analysts. "Whoa there, big fella," Dave said, his voice completely steady as he stepped closer to the literal incarnation of universal nightmare. "You're a big, shiny guy, aren't ya? Did you fall out of that shooting star?" The Hunt Alpha's primary processing matrix experienced a cascading logic loop. Its entire existence was predicated on tracking the chemical trail of fear, and this creature was emitting nothing but casual, mid-afternoon relaxation. The ultimate bioweapon lowered itself slightly, its sensory tendrils twitching in absolute, paralyzing bewilderment. On the observation deck, the Xylos technicians frantically ran diagnostic checks on the Hunt Alpha, convinced that the atmosphere of Planet 712 had corrupted its predatory cognitive centers. Down on the surface, Dave reached into the deep pocket of his flannel shirt and pulled out a hard-baked, stale ration biscuit that he had forgotten to eat during his morning shift. He held it out toward the multidimensional terror, which instinctively bared 3 rows of interlocking, translucent teeth in response to the gesture. Dave didn't flinch. Instead, he casually tossed the hard biscuit across the clearing, pointing a finger toward the edge of the woods. "Go get it, big guy. Fetch," he called out with a cheerful whistle. The Hunt Alpha's hyper-reactive predatory tracking subroutines, hardwired to instantly pursue any rapidly moving object within its field of vision, overrode its temporary confusion. The monster blurred across the dirt, kicking up a cloud of red dust as it chased the spinning biscuit, catching the dense ration in its razor-sharp jaws with a loud, metallic snap. But instead of consuming the object, its ancient tracking logic dictated that it return to the point of origin to reassess the threat. It trotted back to Dave, holding the spit-covered biscuit tightly in its maw, its terrifying eyes staring up at the human. Dave reached out with a completely bare hand and firmly patted the monster's razor-sharp shoulder plating, ignoring the ozone smell of its active energy shield. "Good boy, Barnaby. What a smart boy," Dave praised, rubbing the creature right behind its primary sensory cluster. The Xylos monitors went entirely dead silent as the ultimate weapon of the Directorate leaned into the human's touch, letting out a low, rumbling sound that sounded horrifyingly like a purr. A standard galactic week passed, and the situation on Planet 712 degenerated from a tactical failure into a complete bureaucratic absurdity. The Xylos analysts watched, utterly hypnotized by the daily logs, as the galaxy's most feared bioweapon was completely integrated into the mundane routines of the human colony. The colonists, apparently taking their cue from Dave, showed no fear of the shifting obsidian nightmare. Instead, they treated it like an oversized, slightly eccentric stray dog. A group of human engineers had constructed a makeshift, oversized high-visibility orange vest out of industrial tarp and strapped it around Barnaby's midsection, ensuring that the heavy farm tractors wouldn't accidentally bump into him during the dusty twilight harvests. Barnaby seemed to adapt to his new wardrobe with strange pride, clacking his plates happily whenever the vest was buckled. The creature quickly learned the unspoken boundaries of human civilization, instinctively understanding that the small human children running around the colony were entirely off-limits for rough play. Instead of stalking prey through the dimensional rifts, Barnaby could usually be found curled up next to the colony's central power generator, utilizing its ambient heat while Dave used a heavy bristled shop broom to brush the dust out of the creature's interlocking armor plates. The ultimate hunter had been thoroughly, completely domesticated by a species that simply refused to acknowledge its capacity for destruction. The true depth of the human-monster bond was demonstrated on the 10th day of deployment, when a genuine threat emerged from the wilderness of Planet 712. A massive, indigenous carnivore, a beast covered in thick muscle, sporting 6 legs and a maw capable of crushing durasteel, lumbered out of the treeline, zeroing in on a human toddler who had wandered away from the perimeter playground. The Xylos analysts held their breath, expecting Barnaby to either ignore the event or join in the hunt. Instead, the Hunt Alpha's protective subroutines, newly calibrated by a week of human affection, snapped into absolute alignment. Barnaby did not roar, nor did he rush into a messy, violent physical confrontation. Instead, he utilized his engineered Apex tracking capabilities for defensive psychological warfare. He locked his multidimensional signature onto the native predator and simply appeared directly at the edge of its peripheral vision. Everywhere the indigenous beast turned, Barnaby was there, perfectly motionless, an unblinking mass of obsidian shadow standing just outside its strike range. For 3 consecutive days and nights, Barnaby tracked the predator's every micro-movement, never attacking, but never allowing the beast a single moment of rest or sleep. By the 4th morning, the native apex predator suffered a literal, measurable nervous breakdown from the psychological stress of being flawlessly stalked, turning and fleeing back into the deep wilderness, never to return. The humans celebrated by giving Barnaby an entire grilled side of local livestock, which he happily consumed on Dave's porch. While the humans and Barnaby enjoyed their peaceful coexistence on the planet below, disaster struck the upper atmosphere. The Xylos observation station was suddenly engulfed by a massive, rogue cloud of the Scourge, a highly aggressive, fast-multiplying parasitic collective that drifted through the void, consuming advanced technology, structural metals, and organic matter with terrifying speed. The station's automated laser grids and plasma shields were overwhelmed within minutes as the microscopic entities chewed through the outer sensor arrays and began boring into the primary hull. Internal hull breaches were reported across all sectors, and the sophisticated automated security droids were instantly short-circuited and dismantled by the incoming swarm. The high-ranking Xylos analysts and commanders found themselves entirely cut off, retreating deep into the heavily reinforced inner sanctum of the observation deck as the screeching sound of tearing metal echoed through the bulkheads. With their primary communications array shattered and no military enforcement fleets within 3 light years, the desperate commander realized they had only one functional asset left in the entire system. They turned their remaining emergency short-range terminal toward the planetary feed below, looking directly at the slumbering form of the Hunt Alpha. With trembling appendages, the primary Xylos technician accessed the deep security protocols of the Directorate's military database, inputting the ancient emergency override codes designed to force the Hunt Alpha into its unrestricted, maximum aggression kill state. They uploaded the complex genetic and energetic signature of the Scourge swarm directly into Barnaby's primary targeting matrix, bypassing his localized neural dampeners to trigger the dormant, hardwired instincts of the ultimate bioweapon. Down on the surface of Planet 712, Barnaby was in the middle of a spirited game of fetch, his eyes locked onto a bright, neon-green tennis ball that Dave had just launched using a plastic throwing stick. The emergency remote signal hit the creature's receiver array like a bolt of lightning. Barnaby froze instantly mid-stride, his entire body going completely rigid as the green tennis ball bounced harmlessly past his snout and rolled into the dirt. His obsidian armor plates compressed with a loud, metallic screech, locking into an absolute combat configuration, and his sensory tendrils began to vibrate with a high-pitched, lethal killing frequency that shattered the windows of the nearby supply shed. Dave stopped, his smile fading as he recognized the sudden, volatile shift in the creature's demeanor. He took a cautious step back, holding the plastic throwing stick like a guard, his voice laced with genuine concern. "You okay there, buddy? What do you hear?" Barnaby did not look at Dave. His newly re-engineered tracking matrix had bypassed the trivialities of the local planet, zeroing in on the massive concentration of the Scourge signature vibrating in the upper atmosphere. The monster turned its head slowly toward the sky, its multi-jointed limbs coiling like heavy industrial springs as it calculated the precise trajectory required to intercept the target. With an explosive burst of kinetic energy that left a deep, glassy crater in the red dirt, Barnaby launched himself forward, sprinting toward the nearest sheer cliff face. He scaled the vertical rock wall at impossible speeds, his claws carving deep grooves into the solid stone as his dimensional shifting subroutines began to blur his physical form, allowing him to pierce through the heavy atmospheric friction. Up on the station, the inner sanctum doors were groaning under the immense pressure of the Scourge swarm, the metal panels warping inward as the tiny, glowing parasites began to chew through the final security seals. The Xylos commanders closed their eyes, preparing for the end, when the primary ventilation shaft exploded outward in a spectacular shower of sparks and metal shrapnel. Barnaby burst into the room like a localized black hole, a whirlwind of obsidian blades, crushing force, and hyper-calculated predatory logic. He didn't just fight the swarm, he anticipated its collective movements, shifting across dimensions to intercept and obliterate entire clusters of the parasite before they could react, systematically clearing the entire command deck in a matter of flawless, terrifying minutes. The screeching of the parasites ceased, replaced by the heavy, rhythmic echoing of the station's emergency life support systems. The room went completely dead silent as the terrified Xylos analysts slowly opened their eyes, pulling themselves up from the deck plates to look at the center of the room. There stood the Hunt Alpha, completely uninjured, its obsidian armor slick with the glowing, neon residue of the neutralized swarm, its sensory tendrils still twitching with active combat energy. The aliens cower in absolute terror, realizing that they were now entirely unprotected and face to face with the fully activated, unrestricted bioweapon they had created. A beast that could erase their existence with a single swipe of its multi-jointed limbs. Barnaby stood over them, his terrifying gaze sweeping across the trembling crew, before he slowly trotted over to the primary scientist's high-tech control console. The monster unhinged its massive, razor-sharp jaws, lowered its head over the delicate glass interface, and gently dropped the neon-green tennis ball, which he had apparently snatched out of the dirt and held in his secondary throat pouch before launching himself into orbit, directly onto the desk. Barnaby then dropped into a relaxed, heavy sit, wagged his lower armor plating against the metal floor, and let out a soft, rhythmic chuffing noise, staring at the scientist expectantly. The Xylos technicians stared at the ball, then at the monster, as the brilliant, terrifying truth finally computed within their database. The humans had never broken the creature's apex tracking programming. They had merely translated it into a language of affection. Barnaby had not ascended to the heavens to wage a glorious, hateful war against the Scourge. He had tracked the signal because his human-trained mind believed that the massive energy signature was simply the ultimate destination of the game, a complex obstacle course he needed to complete to return the ball to his pack leaders. Humans did not merely conquer or kill the monsters of the universe. They gave them a name, a home, and a brand new purpose wrapped in absolute loyalty. Trembling with a mixture of profound relief and cosmic awe, the primary alien scientist reached out with a shaky appendage, picked up the wet, spit-covered tennis ball, and hurled it down the long, damaged corridor of the starship. Barnaby let out a happy, metallic bark and bounded after it at full speed, his orange high-visibility vest flapping against his armor as he went. The High Commander slowly turned back to the terminal, opening the Galactic Encyclopedia entry for humanity, and began to type a single, urgent warning note for the rest of the galaxy. Do not threaten them, and under no circumstances should you ever touch their toys. If you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe my channel.